I was King George III. I ruled 1/4 of the known world. My word was law, my navy invincible. And I was humiliated by a handful of farmers and a general named Washington. They called it a revolution. I called it betrayal. You know the story of how America was born. This is the story of the king who lost it. The year was 1760. I was 22 years old when the crown touched my head. Young, eager, terrified. They told me I was chosen by God, that the empire stretched so far the sun never set on British soil. From India to the Caribbean, from Canada to the colonies in America. All mine, all under my care. I believed them. I stood before Parliament and spoke of duty, of brotherhood, of a united realm where crown and colony lived as one family under heaven's gaze. I wrote letters late into the night, elegant, careful words to my ministers across the ocean. Let us guide them with wisdom, I said. Let us show them the glory of loyalty. I dreamed of harmony, a world where order and love were the same thing. But even then, whispers crawled through the halls of Westminster. The colonists grow restless, Your Majesty. They speak of taxation without representation. Pamphlets, sire, seditious words about liberty. Liberty. The word tasted bitter even then. I dismissed it. Youthful rebellion, nothing more. Every child tests their father. Every subject questions authority before understanding its necessity. I was their king. They would learn. But in Boston, in Philadelphia, in the smoky taverns of Virginia, men gathered in shadows. They printed papers that mocked my name. They burned effigies of my ministers. They spoke of rights I had never granted. And I tightened my grip, because to yield would be to admit that a king could be wrong, that divine order was negotiable, that the empire, my inheritance, my sacred charge, could fracture under the weight of entitled voices demanding what was never theirs to demand. I sent orders, firm but fair, restore order, collect the taxes, remind them who provides their prosperity. I told Lord North, they will see reason. They must. He nodded, but his eyes, even then, his eyes held doubt. The seeds were already in the soil. I just refused to see them growing. I stood at the window of St. James Palace, gazing toward the horizon, toward that vast ocean separating me from my children across the sea. And I prayed they would remember their place. They didn't. The reports arrived like hammer blows. Boston Harbor, tea dumped into the sea like garbage. My tea. British property, destroyed in a spectacle of mockery. They dressed as savages. They howled like animals. They danced on the docks as if rebellion were a carnival. I read the dispatch 3 times, certain there had been some mistake. Your Majesty, Lord North said carefully, the colonists are escalating, as if this were a negotiation, as if children throwing tantrums deserved diplomatic language. They have destroyed crown property, I said, my voice steady, controlled. This is not protest. This is insurrection. Parliament erupted. Some demanded swift punishment. Others, the weak ones, whispered of compromise, of repealing the taxes, of listening to their grievances. Listening to rebels. I rose before them all and spoke the words I knew in my soul were true. We will not be dictated to by our subjects. The chamber fell silent. They are Englishmen, I continued. They enjoy our protection, our prosperity, the might of our empire, and in return they owe us loyalty, obedience. These are not requests, they are the foundation of civilization itself. Applause. But not from everyone. I saw the doubt in their faces, the merchants who feared losing trade, the lords who whispered that perhaps we had pushed too far, too fast. Cowards, all of them. I returned to my chambers and read the letters again, not from Parliament, from America. Pamphlets, declarations, words dripping with self-righteousness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No taxation without representation. The rights of free men. Free. They were already free. Free under the greatest empire the world had ever known. free under laws that had brought order to chaos for 1,000 years. But they wanted more. They always wanted more. I saw them clearly now, not as confused children, but as ungrateful heirs spitting on their inheritance. Virginia's planters, Boston's merchants, Pennsylvania's radicals, they spoke of liberty while profiting from my Navy's protection. They invoked God while defying his chosen order. They weren't revolutionaries. They were hypocrites. Lord North entered without knocking, his face ashen. "Sire, the violence spreads. Militias are forming. They're calling themselves Minutemen." "Let them call themselves whatever they wish," I said. "Words do not stop armies." "Your Majesty, if we send troops—" "When we send troops," I corrected. He hesitated. That damnable hesitation I would come to know so well. Some believe negotiation might still— "Negotiation?" I stood, my hands flat on the desk. "You negotiate with equals, Lord North, not with subjects who have forgotten their place." I moved to the map on the wall. My empire painted in red, so much red. And there, across the Atlantic, those 13 colonies, small, fragile, dependent. "They test us," I said quietly. "They believe we will flinch, that we will choose peace over principle." I turned to face him. "Send the redcoats, not as conquerors, as fathers correcting wayward sons. Show them what defiance costs. Show them that the crown does not negotiate with rebellion." Lord North bowed and left. I returned to the window, watching rain streak the glass. Somewhere across that ocean, men were gathering, plotting, convincing themselves that their treason was righteous. But I knew better. I had God, I had history. I had the greatest military force the world had ever seen. They had pamphlets and anger. This would be over quickly. It had to be. The armies sailed, thousands of them. The finest soldiers Europe had ever forged, scarlet coats gleaming like blood on water. I watched from the Admiralty maps as pins moved across painted oceans. New York would fall first, then Boston, then the rest would crumble like dominoes. "Swift and decisive," I told my generals. "Remind them what empire means." The first reports were glorious. New York, ours. The rebels scattered like autumn leaves before wind. Washington fled across rivers, abandoning supplies, dignity, everything. I read the dispatches aloud to Lord North. "You see, they have no stomach for real war. This charade ends before winter." But winter came, and the rebels didn't disappear. They melted into forests, struck at supply lines, fought like ghosts. No honor, no formations, just ambushes and retreats. My generals sent letters dripping with frustration. They refused to engage properly, Your Majesty. Properly. As if war had manners they were violating. "Then adapt," I wrote back. "Hunt them. Crush them. Show no quarter to traitors." But the maps kept changing. Pins moved, then moved back. Victories turned hollow. We held cities while they held countryside. And then, France, the most humiliating betrayal of all. Louis XVI, that weak fool, sent ships, sent gold, sent armies to aid my subjects against me. I raged. I shattered inkwells against walls. This was no longer colonial discipline. This was war between empires, and France sought revenge for past defeats by bleeding me in America. Lord North grew quieter each month, his reports less confident. "The cost, Your Majesty. Parliament grows restless. The debt. Damn the debt!" I slammed my fist down. "What price unity? What price the empire itself?" He had no answer. Late at night, I read the intercepted letters, Washington's words to his troops. He spoke of providence, of endurance, of a cause blessed by heaven itself. I threw them into the fire. Providence? He dared claim God's favor while defying God's anointed king. This was madness, blasphemy wrapped in virtue. But doubt crept in, not in my rightness, never that, but in my power to enforce it. Loyalists sent desperate pleas. "The rebels grow bolder, Your Majesty. We cannot hold without more support." I sent what I could, but the ocean swallowed resources like a void. 3 years became 4, 4 became 5. My generals bickered, my ministers whispered. My treasury bled. And across that cursed ocean, farmers and merchants kept fighting. I knelt in prayer every night, hands clasped so tight my knuckles whitened. Show them, Lord. Show them the cost of defiance. Prove that order will prevail. But God remained silent. And Washington kept writing letters about providence. I told myself it was only a matter of time, only a matter of will. I told myself loyalty couldn't be destroyed, only tested. I told myself many things in those years. Almost all of them were lies. The war became a grinding, endless thing, consuming gold, blood, and hope in equal measure. I stopped reading casualty lists. The numbers blurred together. Sons of England dying in forests whose names I couldn't pronounce, fighting men who refused to die with them. 6 years, 7. Parliament met in hushed tones. I heard whispers beyond closed doors. Unsustainable, unwinnable, madness. They spoke as if I couldn't hear. Lord North came to me, older now, grayer, his loyalty like a worn cloak barely holding together. Your Majesty, he began, voice hollow, we must discuss terms. Terms? I looked up from the maps. Terms with rebels? Terms with a reality we can no longer ignore. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The French fleet controls our supply routes. Spain has joined against us. The Dutch smuggle weapons to Washington. All of Europe bleeds us while my subjects spit on their king, I finished. Yes, I'm aware. He winced. Sire, if we negotiate now, we might salvage. Salvage. The word tasted like poison. We salvage nothing by surrender. We teach the world that rebellion succeeds, that empire crumbles before pamphlets and pitchforks. We teach the world that wars have costs, he said quietly, and some costs are too high. I stood, my chair scraping stone. The cost of losing America is high, Lord North, but the cost of admitting a king can be defied. That cost destroys everything. Every colony, every subject, every thread holding this empire together. He said nothing, just stood there defeated before the battle ended. I dismissed him and returned to Washington's letters. They arrived regularly now, intercepted by my intelligence networks. He wrote to Congress, to his officers, to France. Always the same theme: endurance, providence, destiny. We fight not for conquest, he wrote, but for the natural rights of man. Heaven smiles upon those who persevere in righteousness. Righteousness. A traitor invoking righteousness. I crumpled the letter. He was everything I wasn't. Patient where I was urgent. Flexible where I was firm. He won by retreat, by survival, by turning weakness into myth. And his men loved him for it. Mine obeyed me because they had no choice. The reports worsened. Cornwallis trapped somewhere in Virginia. No relief coming. French ships circling like sharks. I sent orders. Hold position, reinforcements en route. But we both knew there were no reinforcements left to send. I walked the palace gardens alone, hour after hour, speaking to no one. Sometimes I imagined the colonists returning, kneeling, begging forgiveness. We were wrong, Your Majesty. We were foolish. Take us back. And I would lift them up, magnanimous, forgiving. The father welcoming home his prodigal sons. But these were fever dreams. The truth waited in Virginia, where Cornwallis dug trenches and watched the horizon for ships that would never come. I knelt in chapel and prayed the old prayers, the ones about divine right and sacred duty. But the words felt empty. God had gone silent. Or perhaps he was speaking, just not to me. Washington claimed providence. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was the one who misunderstood heaven's will. No, I couldn't believe that. To believe that was to believe everything I'd done, every order, every sacrifice, every death, was for nothing. So I prayed harder and waited for the miracle that would never arrive. October 19th, 1781. The date is burned into my memory like a brand. The messenger arrived at dawn, mud-splattered, exhausted. He knelt but couldn't speak, just handed me the dispatch. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Cornwallis has surrendered at Yorktown. 6 words that ended everything. I read them again and again. Surely there was more. Context, explanation. Some detail that would make this something other than what it was. But no, just those 6 words in the abyss. 7,000 men, my finest general, surrounded, starved, and forced to lay down arms while Washington's ragged soldiers watched. They played a song, the report said, as the British marched out in surrender. The world turned upside down. How fitting, how perfectly, cruelly fitting. I sat in silence for hours. Servants entered and retreated, afraid to speak. Lord North came, but I waved him away. The maps mocked me from the walls. All that red, all that territory, power, might. Defeated by farmers, by traitors, by a general who won by refusing to lose. Parliament convened an emergency session. I wasn't invited. They debated without me, decided without me. The vote came swiftly. Negotiate peace. End the war. Recognize their independence. Independence. The word felt like a knife twisting. They brought me the treaty to sign. Pages of formal language that translated to one simple truth. I had lost. I stared at the document. My hand hovered over the quill. Your Majesty, Lord North whispered, it's over. It will never be over, I said. They'll come back. Once they taste chaos, once they realize what they've thrown away, they'll return. They'll beg to return. He said nothing. His silence was answer enough. I couldn't sign it. Not that day, not for months. I told myself it was principle, but it was pride. Naked, wounded pride. Eventually, my hand moved. The signature appeared on parchment, barely legible. King George III acknowledging that George Washington and his rebels were victorious. Bells tolled in London, not in celebration, in mourning. The sun had set on the British Empire, and I had watched it happen, powerless. In the days after, I wandered the palace like a ghost. Courtiers avoided my gaze. Ministers spoke in whispers. I heard the songs in the streets, ballads mocking the mad king who lost America. Political cartoons showed me weeping, crown askew, while Washington stood tall. I shut myself in my study and wrote letters. Furious, desperate letters to no one. They were mine. By right, by law, by divine order, they were mine. But the ink dried and the words changed nothing. At night, I dreamed of the colonies. Not as they were, but as I'd imagined them. Loyal, grateful, bound to Britain forever by love and duty. I woke alone, the dream dissolving like smoke. Lord North resigned, couldn't bear the weight anymore. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, he said, voice breaking. I failed you. We failed each other, I whispered. He left. They all left eventually, and I remained, king of a diminished realm, ruler of a world that had moved on without permission. I stood at the window watching rain fall on London. Somewhere across that ocean, Washington was being celebrated. A hero, a founding father, and I was here, the villain in their story, the tyrant they'd defeated, the king who lost everything. The years blurred together after that. I ruled technically, signed papers, attended ceremonies, wore the crown. But something inside me had broken at Yorktown, some essential piece that held the world in order. The episodes began slowly, moments of confusion, words tumbling out faster than thought could shape them, hours lost to memories that felt more real than the present. My doctors spoke in hushed tones. Melancholia, they said. Nervous disorder. Madness, they meant. I saw it in their eyes. The pity, the fear. The king was crumbling. I walked the gardens at night, unable to sleep. The trees became confidants, patient listeners to my rambling prayers. I did everything right, I told the oaks. I followed every law, every precedent. I was chosen by God himself. The trees offered no answers. Sometimes I forgot where I was. I'd wake in strange rooms, courtiers staring. They'd guide me back gently, like a child who'd wandered from his nursemaid. I wrote letters to the colonies, dozens of them, rambling, desperate pleas. Return to us, the empire needs you, I need you. They were never sent. My advisors hid them away, embarrassed. But in my fractured mind, I still reigned over 13 loyal colonies. I still received their pledges of devotion. Washington still knelt before me, apologizing for his temporary madness. The delusion was kinder than reality. Visitors came less frequently. My son prepared to rule in my place. The regency, they called it, a polite word for replacement. I raged at first, screamed that I was still king, still capable. But the mirror told a different story. Wild eyes, unkempt hair, lips moving in constant mumbled conversation with ghosts only I could see. One morning I woke with sudden clarity. It happened sometimes. Brief windows where the fog lifted and I saw myself truly. I sat in my chamber, old now, broken. And I understood. I hadn't been betrayed. I'd been left behind. The world had changed, was always changing, and I'd tried to hold it still through sheer force of will. I'd mistaken my subjects' desire for dignity as hatred for me, their need for growth as rejection of love. I'd seen rebellion where there was only evolution. Washington hadn't defeated me, time had. I picked up a quill with shaking hands and wrote one final letter. Not to the colonies. They were a nation now, beyond my reach forever. To myself. Perhaps I was not betrayed, only left behind by a world I could not understand. The fog returned soon after. The clarity faded, but in those last coherent moments I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the peace of victory or vindication, the peace of surrender. I'd spent my life believing that order, obedience, and empire were eternal truths. But empires fall, orders change, and obedience cannot be commanded from the heart, only earned. I never earned theirs. I only demanded it. The final years passed in shadow. I spoke to ghosts, wore my crown at odd hours, wandered halls that felt increasingly unfamiliar. When death finally came, I welcomed it. Not as a king, just as a man who'd tried to stop the tide with his hands, and learned, too late, that some forces cannot be controlled, only accepted. They remember me as the mad king who lost America. Perhaps that's fair, but I was also the last king who believed the world would never change. And for that belief, I paid everything. The story ends, but the echoes remain. King George III died in 1820, blind, deaf, and lost in the labyrinth of his own mind. He never saw America again, never witnessed the nation it became. But his tragedy wasn't the loss of territory. It was the loss of understanding. He lived in a world of certainty, where kings were chosen by God, where empires were eternal, where obedience equaled love. And when that world cracked beneath his feet, he couldn't adapt. He mistook control for care, authority for affection, submission for devotion. He loved his colonies the way a father loves children, believing love meant shaping them into reflections of himself. But love isn't possession, and loyalty cannot be legislated. The Americans didn't reject him because they were ungrateful. They rejected him because he refused to see them as equals, as people capable of choosing their own destiny. Washington understood what George never could, that true leadership isn't holding on tighter, it's knowing when to let go. The empire George tried to preserve through force would have crumbled anyway. All empires do. But by clinging so desperately, he ensured his place in history not as a wise king who adapted to change, but as the stubborn monarch who fought reality itself. His madness wasn't divine punishment. It was the mind's retreat from a world that no longer made sense. When everything you believe is proven wrong, when divine right crumbles, when rebellious subjects become founding fathers, when farmers defeat the greatest army on earth, what's left? Only the terrible freedom of uncertainty. And George III, raised to never doubt, could not survive that freedom. So the lesson isn't about tyranny defeated or liberty triumphant. It's about the cost of rigidity in a changing world, about the danger of mistaking tradition for truth, about the tragedy of men who cannot evolve. Empires fall not when they are defeated in battle. They fall when their rulers cannot see that the world has already moved on. George III didn't lose America. He lost himself, in a past that could never return, fighting a future he could never accept. And in the end, that was the greatest defeat of all. Not on the battlefield, but in the prison of his own certainty.